2021. I'd like to start off with introducing our board members, our fabulous board. We've got Richard Sheffield with Sheffield Spice and Tea, as well as Mass Mutual. Alon with commercial real estate. We've got Eric Abrams with Mobile Medic CPR training, and Pam Jones with Pam Jones Law. Gary Vrooman with Palm Mortuary. We've got Marielle Landry with Affordable Cremation. Frank Herman, who's got his airport in the background. Russ White, our executive director. Myself, Gregory Moore, I'm with State Farm. And I've got to tell you, I would like to take just a moment. As most of you know, one of our board members, Terry Wiltsey, recently passed away. And while he was walking his dog, he tripped and fell. And he wasn't alone, but I can't think of a bigger personality in our community than Terry. He was just such an absolutely amazing person. And with that, I'd like to take just a minute to think about Terry, if you would. Terry's obituary has been posted in the Spectrum, in the magazine that has come out to everybody. You can go online to LasVegasSpectrum.com and see that, along with some just tremendous testimonials that should put a huge smile on your face as you're thinking about some of the interactions that you've had with Terry over the years. His memorial service will be January 14th, this Thursday at 7. And you can find the information to be able to view and participate. But again, Terry was such a large person, present. He was a founding member of Lambda. He is on the Lambda board, and he did so much to work to make life better for each and every one of us. So he will be missed, for sure. Russ, we have some information to share. Do you want to share that at the end of the meeting?
Let's share that at the end of the meeting.
Fantastic. Okay, so with that, I would like to turn control of this over to Pam Jones to introduce our featured speaker. Pam, thank you so very much for all your effort in putting this together.
Oh, thank you, Greg. My pleasure. Well, it's just really an honor and a thrill for me to introduce our guest speaker today. Shannon Minter is the legal director of the National Center for Lesbian Rights, and he's a scholar, an author, a policymaker, and a litigating attorney. He was the lead counsel for the same-sex couples in the marriage cases. And for those of us who were married in 2008 in California, when Prop 8 passed, the marriage cases were more like a mini series that we watched, you know, with gripped hands on the chairs. And Shannon Minter was one of the stars of the show. So I'm thrilled that he's here today. He's done so much work, legal work, and work overall on behalf of our community. And it's because of his leadership that we have a generation of folks who can wake up and feel free to be themselves. And I think that's a remarkable thing. So with that, I am so pleased to introduce Shannon Minter.
Pamela, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for inviting me. And it's really great, you know, to have a chance to to talk with you all. I know you're, a very sophisticated audience about these matters, about kind of what's going on now. It's such a momentous time for, not just for our community, but for the whole country. And I guess given, what a prominent role the U.S. plays in world affairs, is really for the whole world. It can be kind of overwhelming, honestly, trying to make sense of it all. Um, I did, before we delve into the topic of the day, which is kind of what we can expect from the new administration, new Congress. I did want to say something that just to you all about this group, which is that I've been thinking about this so much this past year, but groups like yours that really build community and shore up these and strengthen relationships, between us, between our community members and our, civic minded and public service minded. They're just so important. And I sure don't take for granted all the effort and work it goes into maintaining a group like this and strengthening it. So I really want to applaud you all and thank every single one of you for, being willing to do that. I just think it's more important now than ever. And I worry sometimes in the bigger movement that people pay so much attention to national organizations, but the kind of fiber and strength and backbone of our community is really at the local and state level. So I really appreciate what you all are doing. And then I just wanted to say just a brief word so you have some idea where I'm coming from about who the heck, who the heck I am. Yeah, I've worked I'm a lawyer, obviously, and worked in the LGBT civil rights movement, gosh, for my whole legal career, which is, I think, very unusual. I just had a weird path. I got right out of school. I ended up working for NCLR, National Center for Lesbian Rights. And in fact, I actually even had worked there, an intern there as a law student. And then I've been there now 27 years. And I know that's very odd, but that career trajectory, but that's just what I ended up doing. And it's been amazing. It's just been a wonderful, wonderful experience. But I am a transgender man. I was born female, and I didn't figure out I was transgender because of my age. I just didn't have any information about that till I was in my mid 30s. So I had that experience of living a good chunk of my adult life, being identified as female and trying to do that. I didn't do it very well, but I tried. And I did grow up in a very conservative family and community in rural East Texas. But I just wanted to share with you all. I'm married and have a kid, and but I recently moved back. I convinced my spouse to move back to that tiny little town where I was born in East Texas. And that's where I am right now. And I just been so encouraged. It's really small. It's super conservative. And of course, people here knew me when I was a kid, so they obviously know that I'm transgender. And it's been so amazing and encouraging to me that we have been met with nothing but love, support, warmth. It's restored my faith in something, human nature or something. I'm not really sure, but I just wanted to share that with y'all. Anyhow, so yeah, let's talk about like what we can expect from the Biden administration and new Congress. Obviously, well, it's probably obvious to you all, like this is for sure going to be like the most pro LGBTQ administration in our history. And that's clear both from just the previous records of these two individuals, Biden and Harris, also like the public commitments that they've made so strongly, both when they were campaigning, but then also since they've been elected. So, we can take a lot of comfort from that. And I think we're certainly going to see a lot of positive developments. But what I wanted to, especially since you all are a more sophisticated group, I wanted to talk, acknowledge too, or, talk about some of the challenges they're going to face to try to fully remedy the damage that was done under Trump. And that's challenges are based both on like the courts, the composition of the courts, and the composition of Congress. So I just wanted to talk to you all today about kind of where we need some real remedial action, kind of what we can expect, and also a little bit maybe about what we can do to create a positive climate, for our community. So under President Obama, as we all know, there's so many incredibly huge, important pro LGBT policies and federal rules that were promulgated, and also just so many incredible, well, not so many, but two very important court decisions, with Windsor striking down the Federal Defense of Marriage Act and Obergefell, nationwide marriage equality. And in both of those cases, we had the full support of the Department of Justice and the Solicitor General of the United States. Some of the most important federal policies that happened under Obama were, the Department of Education took a really strong position that LGBT students fully protected under federal law. Department of Health and Human Services promulgated an incredible, like almost just unbelievably good formal rule, implementing the Affordable Care Act that, among other things, spelled out that healthcare for transgender people must be covered, that it cannot be denied. That was revolutionary for transgender people. Because of that, we went from a situation in just a few short years where most transgender people in this country could not access any kind of insurance coverage for transition-related care, whether it was under private insurance or under a public health benefit program, to just the reverse. Now it's completely flipped. And believe me, that has made a huge difference in people's lives. It was just across the board. Department of Housing and Urban Development said that the Fair Housing Act prohibits sexual orientation and gender identity discrimination, homeless shelters, and every federally funded housing program. And then in Dixie, I know this, I'm sure this was something that was particularly of note to you, but under President Obama, with his support, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed by Congress, and then the Department of Defense subsequently on its own lifted the ban on transgender people serving in the military. So I think, it's hard, things move so quickly, it's hard to step back and have any perspective, but if we can, we just look at the impact of all of those policies, the impact of the Supreme Court decisions. It's just been a sea change in the legal and social position of LGBT people before and after that administration. We, in every arena you can think of, healthcare, housing, education, the military, marriage and family law, we're in like an exponentially better position than we were in the past. And I think just as important and sort of what helped push a lot of that along was the change in public opinion. They just went hand in hand. And I think our community was very smart about that during the marriage equality fight, and the Obama administration was very smart about using the bully pulpit to help build public support. And I think we've seen in our country that, when a group achieves legal rights without kind of at the same time bringing public opinion and support along, it often does lead to backlash, and people can get pushback and lose rights that they've gained. And one thing that's I've been thinking a lot about and wanted to say to you all is that now that we're in a position again where we have a supportive administration, I think that's really important for us to keep in mind, and that we should do everything we can to help President Biden and Vice President Harris build and rebuild, in some cases, public support for our community, and that we need to do our part in that work too. And I think especially when our country's so polarized and there's so many, far right groups, and unfortunately President Trump and Vice President Pence, who have used our community as a wedge, that I just think it's more important than ever that we do everything we can to reach out and build bridges, even with people who may not share all our political views, and that we do what we did in the marriage equality movement. We need to do that again, which is emphasize our common humanity and the values that we share with other people. And we need to obviously do that work, not just on our own behalf, but for all the communities and groups that are still facing serious bias and discrimination, and to some degree have lost rights in the past few years. So, communities of color, women, Native American people, immigrants, and of course, we have LGBT people in all of those communities as well. But I just want to share with y'all one real quick example of that. We're doing this amazing program with the NCAA of all things, sports organization, but they're just so really cool and forward thinking. And so we have for the past 5 years sponsored this program with them called it's called Common Grant. And every year we bring together LGBT athletes and advocates with coaching staff and other staff like athletic directors and other staff from like really conservative colleges and universities. And I mean the most conservative ones in the country, from BYU to like like serious hardcore conservative school. And the whole focus of these meetings is to figure out how they can do a better job of supporting LGBTQ students. And it has been eye-opening for me. I've never experienced anything like it in all my years of being politically active and in the movement. And it's really made me kind of a true believer that if we would do more of that kind of work, I think we would be shocked at the impact we can have. It's led to major policy changes at many of these schools. Anyhow, I also wanted to say that, or acknowledge really, that even though the political environment is so polarized, like obviously, but I do know that in Nevada and other places, lots of localities, there's a lot more bipartisan support for LGBTQ issues, and thank goodness there is. And one really bright spot in the past 2 years, I mean, we have been so stymied trying to pass state comprehensive anti-discrimination. Before Virginia passed one last year, that's the first one in 10 years that have passed. Like, we're not doing well on that front. But an exception to that, and I'm knocking on wood and thankful that it is an exception, is the all these minors from conversion therapy. It's something I really care about. I do a lot of work on that issue. We have a whole campaign on that, called Born Perfect. And I know Nevada was the 8th state. There's 20 now. So you all were pretty early on, the 8th state to pass one of those laws. Almost all of them have had bipartisan support, and 9 out of the 20 have been signed by Republican governors, including Nevada's. So, I mean, that is another thing that gives me hope that we actually can build bipartisan support for our community, which obviously we have to have in order to make progress in places that are dominated by conservatives and Republicans. Another bright spot, even though it has gotten almost no attention. I'm actually curious. Even I would just love to know if any of y'all have even heard of this, because it kind of happened and it was like a tree falling in the forest, but no one heard it. But in addition to the Equality Act, which is proposed federal legislation that would create express federal anti-discrimination protections for LGBT people, the Equality Act it's got a few Republican House representatives have signed on. In the Senate, only one Republican. So it is technically bipartisan, but kind of just technically. But there was a companion bill, kind of a Republican version of the Equality Act called Fairness for All, that was introduced. And I think that's super encouraging. I mean, it's Fairness for All. It has more, it's not perfect. It's got religious exemptions that go too far, but it's not terrible either. And it is comprehensive, and they both would establish comprehensive federal anti-discrimination protections. And I think the fact that even Fairness for All was introduced, and it got the support for the first time ever. A large number of kind of center-right religious groups endorsed it. The Council for Christian Colleges and Universities, the National Evangelical Association, Christian Legal Society, some conservative Jewish groups. It was a big deal. So that also, I think, gives us a foundation for some hope that we might actually be able to get enough Republican support to pass federal legislation in the not too distant future. So I'm trying to think what I want to say. Yeah, so we had all the successes under Obama and President Obama, and the big Supreme Court victories, and then of course, President Trump and his administration have just worked very systematically to try to undo all of them, but they have been limited in their ability to do that significantly, not entirely, but significantly by the courts. I'll just hit some of the highlights, but I think tragically, I just think this was so heartbreaking. One of the very first things Trump did is reinstate a ban on military service by transgender individuals. It appeared to be very impulsive. It took all the military leaders by surprise. It did not have the support of the military leadership. It has been devastating for transgender service members. It's been terrible for the military, terrible for our country. President-elect Biden has pledged to lift that ban on day one or very early in his administration, and I am pretty confident that he will do that, and that moment cannot come too soon as far as I'm concerned. I've been very involved in the litigation challenging that, if anybody wants to talk about that. Also real early on, Betsy DeVos, his Secretary of Education, made a big point of taking back the positive guidance about LGBT students under federal law. That was just so cruel and it's caused so much heartache and suffering for those students. But I will say that even though they did that, NCLR and other groups, we have continued to bring federal lawsuits on behalf of LGBT students. And it's the courts that ultimately say what that federal law means, not the Department of Education. Their voice is important, but the courts have the final say. And so far, we've won all of those cases, haven't lost a case yet. And our hope and belief is that, under President Biden, the Department of Education will once again go back to supporting those students and agree with the courts that they are protected under federal law. And kind of long story short, we hope, we have that same hope and expectation about all of the important federal policies in healthcare, housing, employment, immigration, and other areas that, the hope and belief is that President Biden and his administration will come in and, reinstate the positive pro policies that had been in place and that have been displaced under President Trump. But what I wanted to share with you all that may not be, common knowledge is it's not actually, in some cases he can just flip a switch, like getting rid of the trans-military ban. He can do that. But in other cases, it's not that simple for a couple of reasons. And one is that in some of these cases, the Trump administration went through a process of formal rulemaking to reverse good policies and put in place policies that permit discrimination against our community. And so to undo those, the new administration has to likewise go through a formal rulemaking process, and that is slow. That takes forever to do that. So that's something we should just all be aware of. It's not on all these counts you can just come in and go put things right back. You have to go through this process. The other thing that's more concerning to me, because I think it just poses more of a challenge, is that the reality is that, like any rule or policy that the new administration puts back into place, or that may create some new good ones, it can be challenged in court. And the other side, the anti-LGBT legal groups, have become very aggressive and pretty savvy about bringing those challenges. We started to see that at the end of the Obama administration, and they will, cherry pick the jurisdiction. They can file a lawsuit challenging a federal policy anywhere in the country and get a nationwide injunction saying that it cannot be enforced. And there's one judge in particular in Wichita Falls, Texas, my home state. He's the only judge in that district. So if you file in that district, the case will be in front of him. and he has established a track record, a pattern. He will strike down any pro LGBT policy. So they can just file in his court and pretty guaranteed to get a nationwide rule enjoining a policy. So, and then also, President Trump has now appointed 40% of federal judges on the bench now have been appointed by Trump. And of course, he appointed 3 Supreme Court justices. So, that's a serious issue. So it's going to be important for the Biden administration to promulgate new rules carefully and, make sure they're as well supported as they possibly can be, and try to set things up to withstand a legal challenge as much as possible. So I do want to talk also just about legislation, like federal legislation. What are the prospects for finally passing a federal law that protects LGBTQ people? It's an outrage that we don't have a law yet. It's unbelievable. Like we've been trying for decades, since the 70s, to pass a federal law, and for various reasons still don't have one. So here's the situation on that. We have, because of the last election, Democrats do have a slim majority in the House of Representatives, and a very slim, like the slimmest possible majority in the Senate. As a result of the Georgia runoff elections, there are now 50 Republicans in the Senate, 50 Democrats, but because the vice president is the deciding vote in the event of a tie, that gives us like a tiny, bare, literally one person Senate majority. So, you might think, okay, well, but we have a majority in both houses in the presidency. And when I say we, by the way, I'm not intending this to be partisan. It's just a reality that right now the national political reality is the Democrats support the legislation and very few Republicans do. So I just want to be clear about that. I'm not trying to be partisan. These are just the realities right now. But there is but the reason that that's not the case, honestly, is that there's an added wrinkle that because of the Senate filibuster, that most legislation, including the Equality Act, would have to garner 60 votes in the Senate to pass. I mean, it's just hard and fast rule. There's been discussion of doing away with the filibuster, but there is one Democratic senator, Joe Manchin from West Virginia, who has been extremely strongly committed to saying he will absolutely not agree to eliminate the filibuster. So as long as that holds, the Democrats have to get not only all 50 Democrats, some of whom are pretty conservative, but also 10 Republican senators to pass the Equality Act or any other piece of legislation that we would like to see passed. So that's just important for us to know. And then the last thing I just wanted to hit on the Supreme Court and what we can expect. One thing we did not expect, but we're just delighted to see happen in the court last year was the Bostock decision. Wow, I have never seen anything like that. It was such a delightful surprise. The court held that Title VII, federal law protecting workers and employees, fully protects gay and transgender workers. It was a 6-3 decision authored by conservative Justice Gorsuch, joined by conservative Chief Justice Roberts. Every single other pro-LGBT Supreme Court decision was by a 1-vote margin, was 5-4. This is the first time we've had a 6-3 majority, and it's fantastic. And because the decision, that's really helpful. And it makes it much harder for the court to think about undoing that. I don't think that's not even possible right now. And also because the decision was so straightforward. There was no equivocating or ambiguity. It said the term sex in federal law must be construed to protect a gay or transgender person. The discrimination because a person is gay or because a person is transgender is sex discrimination, period, full stop, that simple. That means that same analysis, because it was so clear and straightforward, that applies. That's going to apply, and of course, we're already doing it, to every single other federal sex discrimination law. So that's incredible. So essentially, that decision gave us not just employment, but education, housing, and healthcare. I mean, huge. I mean, so one question that people ask, and I mean, I've asked myself, so, okay, now that we won Bostock and we have the 6-3 majority with conservative justice and appointed by Trump and the Chief Justice too, why do we need federal legislation? And I think we do, for a couple of reasons, because we, want to be sure that we keep all these rights and that a future Supreme Court can't chip away at them or take them away. And another is that there are two areas, pretty important big areas where there's not a federal sex discrimination statute. So the only way to get protection is to pass a new law, and that's public accommodations. There is a federal public accommodations anti-discrimination law, but it doesn't apply to sex. It's only race. And so we don't have if we're going to get protections for LGBT people and women, we have to pass a new law. And then the other one is federal funding. Right now, there is a law that prohibits federally funded programs, services, etc., from discriminating, but it's only on race. It's only on race, not sex. So we don't get the benefit of the Bostock decision because there's no federal sex discrimination law that prohibits discrimination in federal funding based on sex. So that's why we do still need the law. And then in terms of what we can see from the Supreme Court going forward, I mean, it's likely we're going to see the court creating some new religious exemptions. It's almost certain to happen. There's a case in front of them now called Fulton. You probably read about it. That's the issue is whether a religious adoption agency that receives federal funding, that receives government funding can invoke the constitutional right to religious liberty to discriminate against same-sex couples. So ordinarily, all of the adoption agencies that get government money have to agree that they won't discriminate based on sexual orientation. But Catholic Charities says, hey, we're a religious agency that would violate our religious beliefs, so we're entitled to an exemption from that requirement based on the constitutional protection for religious liberty. The court hasn't ruled yet, but there's a pretty widespread consensus that they're likely to rule in favor of the adoption agency, but no one's quite sure. It could be very broad, or it could be narrowly, or maybe they won't. We have to see. But this court has definitely indicated that it is very sympathetic to claims of religious liberty. So just to wrap up, and thanks again. It's awesome to have a chance to talk to you all about all this stuff. But just to wrap up, there's a couple of things I wanted to leave y'all with, a couple thoughts. One is that we definitely have to keep fighting to get full legal protections. We don't quite have them yet. We still don't have the federal law, for example, and there's still some unanswered questions, about transgender people's ability to access facilities, restrooms, locker rooms, and play sports based on gender identity. There's still some outstanding questions along those lines that are issues that are really like just traditional anti-discrimination issues. But what I think we have to start really thinking about is that, because we have made so much progress on the anti-discrimination front, is that if we just think about our community and what's happening to people in our community and where are people really suffering, like what are the most serious harms that are affecting like the health and well-being of the most people who identify as LGBTQ right now, it's really poverty and economic inequality, especially when that gets mixed in with enduring racism and sexism too, honestly. But we do know there's so much new research now And I think we need to do a better job of letting people know about it. There's so much research now that shows that LGBTQ people are honestly dramatically more likely to be poor, to be either low income, poor, to be homeless, or dealing with serious like housing and food insecurity, to be really dependent on food stamps and other like public benefit programs. Um, there's a lot of LGBT parents, especially single lesbian mothers, especially Black lesbian mothers, who have their children wrongly taken away from them by child welfare authorities just based on pure bias, not because they're neglecting or abusing their children. Uh, and I think in some ways the most shocking statistics that have emerged in recent years are nearly 20%, like it's like 1 in 5 kids in the child welfare in foster care child welfare system or in a juvenile detention facility are LGBTQ. Like that is mind blowing. Like that is a crisis. That's serious. Like shame on us that we have let things get to that stage. But anyhow, I think we really, as a movement, need to get real serious about these problems. But I think one thing it means, and it's really, we're working hard at NCLR, and I know, and I'm personally am, and I know a lot of people are to try to really wrap our minds around. Okay, we're so used to just thinking about everything in terms of anti-discrimination, but this is a different framework, and we just have to figure out how to broaden our understanding of what counts as an LGBT issue, and make sure that we're really lending our voices and our support to like policies and measures that will directly and dramatically improve the health and well-being of people in our community. And so then the last point, I'll stop and I want to see what y'all are thinking, or if anybody has comments or questions. But I just is really coming to grips with the reality that most LGBT young people in this country, most of them live in conservative families and communities. Just demographically, that's true, and those families desperately need more resources and support so they can learn how to support and accept their own LGBTQ kids. I mean, that's one of the reasons so many of those kids end up in the foster care and juvenile justice system, because their families just don't know how to deal with an LGBTQ kid. And I've seen, too often our movement, especially the national movement, I think falls into this trap of just assuming that families are the enemy, and that the only thing we can do is just tell LGBT youth who have families who are not supportive or accepting, well, just try to hang on, try to survive till you're 18, and then you can move to some gay-friendly city. I mean, that is just not realistic or sufficient. I think about, I don't know if any of you know Mitchell Gold. He's he's pretty well-known gay businessman. He owns Mitchell Gold Furniture. It's a big fancy furniture line, but he's also very active in advocating for LGBT youth. And he for years has been trying to get this message across about how urgently we need to do something to help LGBT young people who live in conservative families, again, who's probably the majority of LGBT young people in the country. But his sister was helping him write a book. And I'll never forget this story. She shared that she was interviewing this young man in North Carolina. He was 16. He's gay, and his family was just being terrible to him. They thought he was going to hell, and they were being very rejecting. He was getting harassed at school. And she said she just found herself thinking, well, what do I say? What can I say to him? And saying to him, well, just, if you can just wait it out till you're 18, you can move, and you can go somewhere where there's so much more support and acceptance, and you can have a happy, wonderful life. Every time I try to tell this story, I end up getting choked up. But, she said that he said to her, well, thank you, ma'am, thank you. But I don't want to live in a city. I don't want to leave my home. And, when the time comes, I want to sit with my parents and grandparents in heaven. And the truth is we really as a movement have very little to offer that young man or other young people who are in that situation. So, and if you just look at all of the resources, all of the organizations, national, local, state, at this point, we have a pretty well-funded movement. And it literally, if you were to do a survey of what percentage of budgets and resources and programs and publications are devoted to supporting, providing resources to families who have LGBTQ children, it is less than 5%. That has got to change, because just the last thing I want to say to y'all is, like, just imagine if we could finally break the chain, break that cycle of family rejection and abuse that leads so many of us as adults to have to deal with the aftermath of trauma, family rejection. I've dealt with it. I'm sure many of y'all have, all the stuff that goes with it: depression, suicidality, substance abuse issues. Imagine if our young people were growing up and didn't carry those burdens with them forward, into their adult lives. It would just be transformative, not just for our community, but really for the whole country. So anyhow, that's, to me, these frontiers are kind of where the movement, we need to start, paying more attention to those issues. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, and love to hear anything y'all are thinking about the current situation, or any comments or questions.
Great, thank you so much, Shannon. I'm going to read off a question that Judge Krall has posted in the notes. Is there a resource that families can call and speak with someone when they are dealing with a family member who is transgender? This is an issue that comes up frequently, and I don't know where someone can call for family support counseling.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, there are. And I can share links and stuff. I'm not good at doing stuff in real time, but I can make sure y'all get the links. So we have a transgender youth project that has tons of resources, and the guy that runs it, Asaf Orr, is amazing and is in touch with so many parents and families all across the country. There's other resources too, though. There's a wonderful group called Gender Spectrum. They're awesome. They also have incredible website with a lot of resources. And there's just an old-fashioned book. I still like to read books, by Stephanie Brill, Brill. I believe they're coming out with an updated edition of this book. I hope I'm getting the title right. I think it's something like Understanding the Transgender Child or Transgender Children, but I'll double check on that. It's really helpful too. It's amazing there's not more out there, though, because the issues, there's so many kids now and so many parents who want help. Again, I think that just goes to my point. It's incredible that we don't do more to support families. We just really have got to get over whatever is holding us back on doing that. Right. Oh, that's it. Thank you, whoever posted that link.
Right. Gender Spectrum is in the notes. And then Rob has pointed out that in addition to the center, because the center has resources, community counseling is an excellent resource. Gender Justice is also another local organization. And there's another question from Anna Albertson. Are there any specific cities or places that have good programs in place that we can look to imitate in our community?
Yeah. And now that I was thinking about that with y'all, because now that Nevada's in pretty good shape, in terms of getting the basic kind of equality measures in place legislatively, that this would be a great state to try to, y'all been leaders on so many things, to try to, do some leadership initiatives around that issue. Yeah, there are. Anyway, Philadelphia is, oh, well, okay. One place you can go, I should have mentioned this, the very best resource, good gravy, how did I forget that? The very best resource in answer to the judge's question that's related to this question too is the Family Acceptance Project. It's FAP, it's got website, it's got amazing resources for parents. Just like it is evidence-based. They have done groundbreaking research on the impact of family rejection and support on LGBTQ young people. They've studied racially and religiously diverse families and communities, and they have boiled their findings down into very accessible guidance for parents and families. And I mean, it's unreal. Like they literally measure the impact of hundreds of different discrete behaviors, and so they've identified, like, you can now go to a family and tell them, hey, if you do these 10 things, you are going to seriously damage your child. Like, here's what we know. Isolating the child, shaming them. There's a list of things. But in the beauty of this paradigm, their whole framework is not blaming parents at all. I mean, they recognize that in most cases, vast majority of cases, not all, but most, parents are rejecting their children not because they don't love them, because they do love them and they think they're protecting them. They think you can't have a happy future being an LGBT person, and they really think they're protecting their kids. And so most parents, if they're given the information in a sensitive way, culturally sensitive and otherwise, and by the right spokespeople, people they can identify with and trust, they'll change their behavior. When you tell them, hey, I know you think you're helping your child, but hey, when, like conversion therapy is a great example. Like, kids that get sent to conversion therapy, like 8.5 times more likely to attempt suicide. That they have shown, they have tested interventions and shown that parents will respond to that. So, yeah, they're working on some pilot projects across the country. One is in Philadelphia. There's a really cool program in Santa Clara County, California, that might be something that could be a real model for for some jurisdiction in Nevada, maybe Las Vegas. Pilot program that intervenes the minute there's an LGBTQ kid that pops up in the juvenile justice system. They intervene to provide family support with the goal of keeping that young person out of the system and in their family. And it's pretty neat. I mean, but the sad part to me is that there's one pilot program like that in the entire country to address a problem of monumental proportions, like what we should all be viewing as a crisis. Like 20% of kids in juvenile justice systems are LGBT. Like, what on earth? Like, something is clearly very wrong there. And it's not because they're more likely to do bad things. I mean, obviously, it's, because it's just what happens. I mean, what happens is, and it's also, and most of those kids are kids of color. And that is not because those communities are more likely to be homophobic or transphobic. That is a myth that has been disproved up one side and down the other. But those communities are more likely to be struggling economically and to have fewer resources. So whereas like a kid who's in a more economically well-off family is just as likely to face family rejection, but they're more likely to have other resources, like some relative they can go live with, or money to help them do something. But if you're a combination of dealing with family rejection and no economic safety net at all, that's when kids end up in foster care or in juvenile justice systems. But anyway, we could stop this. We could stop that problem if we would just put the resources to it.
Thank you. Let's see. I don't see. Russ has asked that we post our questions in the chat section. I don't see that we have any other specific questions. Yeah.
I appreciate y'all asking questions about that. I really do. And I'd be happy if anybody's interested, or if there's any way I could be helpful to you all going forward, to try to tackle any of those issues. Boy, I would be really honored and happy to do that. I really do.
Yeah, if I could mention that Gary Vroman here, I'm with Palm Mortuary, and we are part of SCI, which is the Service Corporation International, headquartered in Houston, Texas, who's last year started the gay and lesbian LGBT group called Unite, and they put off a whole new group for the transgender group, and they're looking for the best investments that they can make. They're on the top 50 of the stock exchange. So if you have groups out there who are looking to find resources, financial resources, they're looking for ways of assisting that. So you can talk with them or talk with me so that we can get the information to them as to who could use those financial resources best in our national resources, because we're in 45 of the 50 states.
Wow, that's totally an amazing resource. Wow, did not know that.
It's
Thank
new,
you,
so I want to let you know. So contact me. Russ will give you the information, and that way we can help. I can present to them some places to spend the money.
Wonderful. Well,
All right. Well, I guess that's, we don't have any more questions. I just want to say thank you again to Shannon Minter for being here and for such a great talk. And yeah, if anybody has any other questions, I guess we send them on to Mr. Minter. So thank you so much.
oh my gosh, thank y'all so much. I really do appreciate y'all for inviting me. It's great, and it's a pleasure. It's a real pleasure to get to hang out with you for a little bit. If you wondered what was going on with the wall behind me moving, my cat is behind the blanket. One thing I have done in this homebound year is we went from 2 dogs and 3 cats to now have 4 dogs and 5 cats. I found little abandoned kitten and puppy, and then another puppy found us, and then another kitten. So it's been quite an adventure. We have a house.
Great. That's great. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Greg Moore, our president, to wrap up the meeting.
Thank you all so very much. And what a wonderful presentation and sharing of your time. Thank you. Moving into our community announcements, I'll start off with Lambda Linguists has a Toastmasters group, and that Toastmasters group is here to help us with our presentation skills, learn how to operate and function, Mr. McCoy, on this Zoom platform. Would like to invite you and everybody else. It's one of the things that Terry Wiltsey was one of our founding members. So our first meeting will be, of the year, it's going to be February 1st. It's a Monday evening. We'll get the information out. Keep that in mind. And from there, we turn this to Russ to take us to the English Garden then. Thank you.
All righty. So I got an email this week from English Garden. As many of you know who've attended our in-person lunches, they have offered to continue donating floral arrangement to Lambda each month, even though we are virtual. And so we are going to do a live auction for those flowers. I think everyone knows sight unseen that whatever they do is going to be absolutely gorgeous. So I'm going to hand this over to Gary Vrooman to manage the auction part of that, and whoever is the winner, I'm going to follow up with you after the meeting to deal with the logistics. English Garden will deliver them to you or anywhere you designate in the city.
Yeah, and as we know, most of the English Garden collections that they give to us, which they've generously given to us, are worth $150 to sometimes $300 or $400. So I'm going to start the auction at $50. Do I hear 50?
I'll do 50.
Oh, you got $50. Do I hear 75.
All right, you got me for 75.
Oh, thank you. 75, do we have 100?
Maybe Pam will go 150 if you keep trying.
Do I hear 150?
I'll do 100.
100? Great.
I can
Do
name
I
it in
hear
2 notes.
125? We've got 100.
Come on, Tracy.
I think you can have them
125?
for 100. It's kind of like playing Name That Tune these days.
Okay, do I hear 125? Going once? Going twice? Sold.
I'll wait for the February ones.
Oh.
Hey,
Great.
don't
Thanks,
ever,
Pam. Way to
Pam.
donate.
don't ever ask Pam Jones to negotiate for you.
We like Pam a lot. Congratulations, Pam.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Pam. Thanks,
Back to you,
Pam.
Russ.
So we are at the beginning of the year, which is when our traditional membership period. So a lot of people's memberships are coming to an end. So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be doing a membership drive for renewals. There's a few things I'm working on the back end of the website because we're switching to a brand new membership system. And so I've got to coordinate existing memberships with new memberships with accounts. So if you are a member of Lambda, check your email. We've asked everyone to log into the Lambda website using a special link that's in that email. And that will allow me to tie your new account on the website with your existing membership. And then in a few weeks, we'll be kicking off the membership drive for new members. So anyone on the call who's not a member, reach out to me, send me an email, however you figured out how to get on this call. We'd love to have you as a member, and that information will be going out very, very shortly. And I'm going to toss this over to Eric, who is going to tell us a little bit more about what we have coming up with memberships.
All right, so the board has been putting their minds together for the past few months on how to do something new and fun for our new members. So going forward, each person that signs up or as a new member will receive a membership package, welcome kit from us. And the welcome kit will include some goodies as well as a Lambda decal, current member 2021 Lambda decal. Russ is holding that up if you want to look at his box. Pretty cool looking from his fancy printer at home. And we also will include a directory, either that'll be part of the welcome package or be mailed out to you. We're talking amongst ourselves. We know that we're still trying to get over that hump with the COVID in the community, but our intention is to, if you have a hardened storefront or office space, we want to come out and get to know you and present you with that. So obviously everything is very fluid, so we have to adapt, and we'll do that going forward. But we're excited, and we ask all of our members to invite a friend to our luncheon or any of the events we have in the future, because that's how we get the word out.
All righty, thank you, Eric, for that update. Anyone else have any announcements? I don't think we have anything community announcement to bring forward yet. I think there's a few things coming up, but nothing I'm aware of unless somebody, Rob.
So I tried to post a link to the memorial service for Terry on the chat, but every time I hit return, it would take me to a new screen. So, you know, it's at Facebook at craftsussman.com live or something like that. You can find a link to it on the on Facebook at LV Spectrum. So Facebook/LV Spectrum, and it should be the first thing at the top of our page on posts, where we do have a link to it. There's also a link in the print edition of our February issue. It'll tell you where to go there. So,
but, hey, Terry or Rob, is that a Facebook Live where you can just watch what's happening, Or if you want to
watch what's
participate,
happening.
isn't there like an actual Zoom?
There is
link?
there is a Zoom call for it, and I don't have the information for it. But if you send me an email to rob@lasvegasspectrum.com, I will hook you up with a Zoom link.
All right.
I just don't happen to know what it is, so I'll find it.
All right. Thanks, Rob. Anyone else?
Real quick, details are forthcoming by Friday. I should have all the details. We're doing a Bob Forbes celebration at the end of January, the last week of January, the 25th through the 29th. Something just a little every day for what he has done for us in the center and his legacy. Fun things. We're dedicating some artwork. We have Shakespeare in the park. We're doing a thing with an elementary school teacher pickup. So lots of little fun things, not big events. We're going to try to get it live. Russ and Garrett, I'm going to talk to you soon about this, but just something every day, something very small every day that people can come down and either witness Shakespeare in the park in the front of the center or hear some music, and then on Friday, we're doing cake at the Jolt. Come in and get a piece of cake. And
Hey,
I'll send that out as soon as it's all done.
Jim, can I add to that?
Yes.
Anybody wants to, one of the, Terry Wilsey, one of his favorite charities was the center. In fact, that's the primary charity mentioned in his will. So if you want to make a donation in Terry's memory, there is a link on somewhere on the Spectrum Facebook, LV Spectrum, where you can do that to make a donation under a GoFundMe thing. Last I looked, it was, I don't know, $300 or $500. So if you want to make a donation in Terry's memory, we'll get that link activated again if it's not.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it.
All right, everyone. It is 1:02 p.m. We are at our just above the hour mark. So thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you more in 2021 in a new administration, and hopefully a happier celebration coming in a week or so. Thank you, everyone. We'll have a great week, and we'll see you next month.
All right, bye, everybody.
Ciao.
Thank you.